Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special show for you right now. It's going to start in just a second. We're going to talk about a lot of things. Twitter has been on fire today with this fight between Elon Musk and the president. Who saw that coming? Hint, everybody. But also, because the other boys are away, Pi and Buzz have gone thousands of miles away from home. I was left here by myself thinking, how am I going to do this by myself? And Ryan Purvis, one of our part-time contributors, sometime contributors, but also a delegate to the Georgia Republican Party convention, is here to share his insight. So sit back, relax, hit the like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the other side of this intro. Peach Pundit, the podcast, is a conversation filled with the personal opinions of the people who are participating. Any view or opinion expressed belongs only to the person who expressed it and not with anyone with whom that person is professionally affiliated. In Peach Pundit, the Signal thread, I said last night that I would be finishing Jake Tapper's book today, and I almost finished it. I got really close to finishing the Jake Tapper book, but then Twitter got set on fire because Donald Trump and Elon Musk decided to go at each other. And we're going to talk about that. But if you came here because I promised that I would be talking about the Tapper book, apologies. Other things have happened. And there will always be next week. There will always be the next episode. But I want to introduce my friend, Ryan Purvis, who is a delegate to the Georgia GOP convention that actually I think officially kicks off today because the state committee has a committee meeting today. But people, the delegates, the average delegates, will start showing up in Dalton tomorrow. So before we get started with that, I want Ryan to introduce himself and tell us why we should care what he thinks.
Well, thank you, Scott. I'm very delighted to be here with you this evening because after listening to you and Buzz and Jason for all these episodes, I figured our listening audience needs to know what a real Georgia accent sounds like. But of course, channeling the late great Ann Richards, who may or may not have agreed with her very much, but she was good for a laugh over in Texas. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Ryan Purvis. I'm a attorney over here in Bullitt County, the fighting 12th district. So and I'm an avid listener to Peach Pundit. So as I said earlier, I'm very delighted to be here and looking forward to talking about the show this weekend.
Before we get to that, though, are you in the 1st Congressional District?
I am in Georgia 12.
Yeah, Georgia 12. So Buddy Carter's not your congressman then?
No, I'm about 3 miles away from him.
Right. I thought you were because I thought Pooler was sort of that general area was.
Yeah, I live in Bullitt County.
Okay, so
Southeast Bullitt.
So just right across the street, basically. Yeah. What are you hearing about who's going to run to replace Buddy Carter? It doesn't seem like anybody wants to.
You know, that I'm not really hearing a whole lot of people that are interested in doing. I thought that perhaps Burchett would down in Waycross.
That's James Burchett, the majority whip in the House currently.
Yes. Where there was a rumor that Jesse Petrie was going to do it. I don't think he wants it either. I'm told that perhaps we may be looking at a legacy running. And of course, there's one other person that I know you're a big fan of, and she's down in Southeast Georgia. She is obviously running.
So, since you're not naming people, I'll name them. But you got Jim Kingston, the son of former Congressman Kingston. You have Candace Taylor, which it's got to be Kingston, right? I mean,
well, there's also
if those are the choices.
I believe there's a county chairman. I want to say he's in Chatham County. He's also announced for it as well.
Oh, did he? Okay.
Yeah. So there is 2 announced, and I'm sure we're going to be seeing a few more coming along. But for the life of me, I don't know who they are outside of those folks.
You know, I think people who run for county commission, I just love local elected officials. I love them. because they care about zoning and they care about where the sidewalk goes and they care about making sure the potholes are filled. And I love those people.
Well, I had a county commissioner tell me one time that said being a county commissioner is rather thankless sometimes because no matter how I vote, I always piss somebody off.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
so and it's not you don't have that separation from being a state rep or a congressman. This is your neighbor,
Right.
or your neighbor's parents or kids that you've just
I
made
wouldn't want to
mad.
do the job, but I will say this: it is a different skill set, and I'll highlight that in one of the other topics that we're going to talk tonight, because I did moderate a debate or a forum for candidates seeking to be the next senator, state senator from 21st, and we have some local elected officials. It's a different skill set, but we're going to talk about that later too. So, when do you head to Dalton, Ryan?
I will be heading to Dalton at 3 a.m. tomorrow.
Jeez.
I've still got to work from home with a Wi-Fi connection at the lovely Days Inn, so we'll see how that works. But yeah, I'm going to be heading up there super early in the morning. I was supposed to go to state committee today, but I just I have two dogs, and I got to get somebody to watch them. Then the guy that was going to watch it fell down, and so fell apart rather. And now the new one that is going to watch is actually only available tomorrow through Sunday. So unfortunately, dogs come first.
This is the first convention I have not attended in a couple decades. And I mean, I'm looking back at when the last time I didn't attend a convention as a delegate. I mean, I've served as a sergeant at arms. I've served on various committees. I've helped out here and there. But most of the time, I've just been a delegate, even as a state rep, when as a delegate. So I've been sort of on the outside looking in this year. And is there any world in which David Cross could potentially knock off Josh McCoon for chairman?
I think it's a tough road to hoe for him, so to speak. I don't think that's going to happen, but you never know with these things. Currently, I've been told that we're going to be looking at somewhere around 2,000 delegates, which
Pretty
is
big.
that's about 1,800 2,000 is what I've been told. So and it's in Dalton, so we're who are the people that are going to show up to this? People like me who are just gluttons for punishment. I'm doing it, and the people that are pissed off in Southeast Georgia will do it. But the people that may support one candidate or the other, but don't feel especially passionate about it, are they going to show up for it? So we'll see. But I don't anticipate that Cross is going to come out on top. But again, I didn't anticipate a lot of things happening. I didn't anticipate him to win the first time he won. So
Well, he and Brian Pritchard, if I recall, it was pretty close, right? They had to have a runoff in
well,
those.
not with Pritchard did,
Yeah.
but Dave won outright. Uh, it
Oh,
was
because he ran against Brant Frost, right?
and Ken Carroll, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I remember now. Geez, I've blocked so much of that from my memory. It was a bad venue too. Like that Columbus Convention Center was a really
Didn't care for it.
that was I think the second convention I've been to in Columbus, but we were at an arena the first time but we were in this tiny little convention center with a ton of delegates and the president came or well, he wasn't president at the time, but Trump came, which meant lots of security. The line was a quarter mile away from the end of the line was a quarter mile to get into the building from the facility, from the actually getting into the room. And but what have you? I mean, what are we hearing from your perspective? What are the delegates saying as they're heading into this? What do you expect to see?
The main thing I'm hearing from people is just how dirty this whole campaign's been. One need to just get on X and Google or Google. That's how big Google has gotten. Anytime you search, you Google.
Yeah, of course.
Get on X and search for Josh McCoon, and you will find a whole plethora of people that are supporting him. But you'll find a lot of people that are real pissed off about one thing or another. So it's especially with AI now. Now we've got some people coming out with all these different pictures and videos that are just well, quite possibly just some of the most slanderous crap I've ever seen in my life. And I don't know how, a lot of people are calling for unity after this. Man, I don't know. This for today, for example, and for the past couple of days, the cross camp and a lot of people that align with him have been going after Karen Henschel,
Who is a sweetheart of a lady.
the sweetest lady and with one of the hardest workers out there,
Yeah.
for a lawsuit that happened 10 years ago, none of which was ever proven. But they're saying that you should have never, ever have allowed her to continue to work there. These people have no idea what they're talking about. And it takes a lawyer to really explain that. There was a lawsuit 10 years ago under John Paget where there was a former employee that was dismissed, which, full disclosure, I was working for the state party at that time. So I know a little bit about the situation. She was dismissed. She files a lawsuit claiming race, and Karen said some racial things to her. I'm going to say it right now. I ain't buying.
No
Personally,
way. If you
I'm
know
not
Karen
buying it.
Henschel, you know that's not in her makeup.
And so obviously you go into federal court. It gets expensive to file that up there. And so this lawsuit goes on until 2017 and it was filed in 2014. So we're talking 3 years worth of attorney's fees. We're already in it for $1 million. So John Watson comes on and says, hey, we got to settle this and move past it. It's settled. A part of that was the settlement itself was part of an NDA. There was an NDA in the settlement. Okay, so fast forward to the John Paget lawsuit we have now. John Paget is suing the state party because he had to defend himself in that to the tune of $225,000, I think it was. So he thinks that the state party should reimburse him for it. That has been ongoing for a while. And one thing that has been hinged on that was an NDA that was a part of that settlement with the previous case. Well, they are using that NDA, I believe, as an exhibit in the settlement that they're having with Paget now. Paget is saying that they need to disclose that NDA. You do not disclose an NDA. It's literally called a non-disclosure agreement. And so these people on X today have logged on to this and said, well, it's the claims of racism and everything that the state party is trying to hide, and that's what was sealed, and they got it. That is the dumbest mess I've ever heard. First of all, anybody could Google what went on in that case for the last 10 years. It has been there. It is not subject to being sealed as part of an NDA because it's a public court filing. My nephew is headed to middle school soon, which makes me feel really old.
Sure.
Could have found it. And these people online, well, oh my God, this is what I found. And I can't believe that they kept her there because of that. None of that was proven. None of it.
But it's just desperation is what it sounds like.
Yeah.
They know they're losing. Josh McCoon's been endorsed by every member of the congressional delegation who's a Republican. Look, I'm not there. Josh isn't talking to me right now. I hope he does one day. But the reality is he hasn't really given the party reason to kick him out. He's tried to give these folks who are complaining about him stuff that they've wanted. They came up with this legislative agenda for elections this year, which, by the way, they didn't include any elected officials when they were making that agenda. And a lot of the proposals are simply unworkable. They're just not something that you can do. They're not politically feasible and they're not policy feasible either. But he did it anyway. He gave them what they wanted. And the whole package did not pass into law this year. It got sidelined and put on the desk until next year. But they're just not. He's been trying to give them stuff, and much to my chagrin, because I don't support a lot of those things, like getting rid of no excuse early absentee voting, as an example. This is wildly popular with not just all Georgia voters, but with Republican voters, not the people who show up at the convention this weekend, but all Republicans who will pull a Republican ballot. They like that. They like being able to walk in on election day showing their ID, saying, give me a Republican ballot, and going to vote. Or, hey, I am not going to be around. I have to travel. Mail me my ballot. they enjoy the options. And a lot of this was codified in SB 202, which the activist class celebrated, right? And the left attacked. And I even went to Congress to defend SB 202. But he's given them some stuff. But with these folks, because they're not the chair, they're not in complete control, they're not the power, they always move the goalposts.
Exactly. And listen, the old adage is if you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to want some milk, right? And so it's not only that, but I mean, there's issues with we have really gotten to a point that we have given a voice to people that don't really understand what they're saying. And I understand that, we make the jokes about politicians and things like that, but these people literally don't know what they're talking about.
Right.
David Cross, for example, has vowed to dissolve the incorporation of the Georgia GOP on day one. That is about as an idiotic of an idea with any person with a functional brain can possibly have.
Right. This is guy, I guess he's out of Forsyth County, who thinks that because it's incorporated as a scam, then and that it's a way for Brad Raffensperger to own the party because he's Secretary of State and is over corporations. It's a conspiracy theory that they created a whole cloth that demonstrates they have no knowledge of how corporations work, what they're for, the protections they give their members through the corporate shield.
They're confusing political party status with corporate structure.
Right.
Those are two separate things. You're and just real quick on OCGA 21, which defines a political party, it's any political party which at the preceding general election nominated a candidate for statewide office and whose candidate received at least 20% of the total vote cast in state for such office. By every measure, the Georgia Republican Party is a party.
Yeah, legally.
It's in the name.
Right.
And some would say, well, 501c4 nonprofits registered with the Secretary of State. Yes, it is. That's how we register them here. We've actually got the legal opinion from the Secretary of State's counsel saying, hey, yeah, you're good on your paperwork. You don't need anything. Everything's fine.
Right. So what other fireworks do you expect, or is any other races, or are there going to be any type of condemnations of elected officials who are Republicans currently, like we've seen our attempts to do that through resolutions in the past?
Resolutions are good for nothing. So, we'll probably see a lot of nothing. I anticipate we're probably going to see a bill condemning or something to do with John Burns and perhaps something to do with Brad Raffensperger. And any resolution that is brought to them will go, I'm sure, directly into the trash because that's where it deserves to go. Now, as far as I have no idea where the accountability rule is going to go this year, and we'll see. We'll see that. I don't think it goes anywhere, but we'll see. But as far as resolutions are concerned, that's going to happen. As far as the specific races on this, one, I can't say that I've ever been interested in an assistant secretary race in the Georgia Republican Party before. We've got the current secretary, Caroline Jeffords. She has decided to run for assistant secretary against Kylie Kramer. Kylie Kramer, of course, is the organizer of January 6th and the daughter of Miss Amy Kramer, who is our national committee woman. And there's also another person in the race. His name is Jaquan Stembridge. He's from Greene County. He is 18 years old, and he is just about as impressive as a young man as I've seen. He's a young black man. Speaks very well, dresses very well, and he's I believe the Georgia Teen Republican chair. He's in the College Republicans, and he's a young Republican. And by the way, he's going to college. So this young man's got a lot on his plate. The reason mostly that race is going to be interesting is, I got to say, it's mostly because of Kylie and the Jaquan. Kylie, of course, has been going off on her ex, Twitter X, whatever you want to call it. Seems like she needs to be running for chair because she has not said anything, as far as I know, about the other assistant secretary candidates. She has accused Josh McCoon of embezzlement, um, peddling the crime, tagging the Department of Justice in tweets and the FBI and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
I can't get a read on her. I don't understand what's going on, but that one's going to be interesting because there's been a lot of back and forth from Miss Kramer to really the chair on that. So I'll be interested to see where that goes.
Well, you're not likely to see very many state house reps at the convention this week. If you're going to convention and you want to know why, yeah, you'll see maybe a few, but you're not going to see them in mass. And we're going to tell you why on the other side of the break. Our friends at Americans for Prosperity want you to know that they're working to reignite the American dream through prosperity for all. And I got the opportunity to host and moderate their debate for the 21st Senate District special election coming up. And 5 of the candidates there out of the 7 participated, and it was very well done. Not because I was there, but because they just organized so incredibly well. And that's what they do. They put on these events. They also mobilize. They spend money in races. They also inform the voters. They're a tremendous resource. Go visit our friends at americansforprosperity.org and learn how you can get involved and learn more about economic freedom policies that they support. Thank you again to our friends at Americans for Prosperity for being a partner level Patreon. More on that debate/forum that I hosted coming up in the podcast. If you too would like to join them as a patron, head on over to patreon.com/peachpundit. Sign up for one of our tiers today. You can join us in our double secret, no military secrets shared signal chat that we have, which is where I put out the call and we got Ryan to come join us. It's been very lively today. It's been a great tool. So join us in the signal chat. And after this message, we'll start talking about some other stuff.
Peach Pundit has an anonymous Patreon who would like to invite you to learn more about the Alzheimer's Association. The Alzheimer's Association leads the way to end Alzheimer's and all other dementia by accelerating global research, driving risk reduction and early detection, and maximizing quality care and support. No one should fight Alzheimer's alone. With your help, no one will. Learn more on their website, alz.org.
So I was talking with some folks in House leadership during the legislative session, and this topic came up. It was a scheduling conflict, basically. For a long time, I've been talking about here on the podcast, there's this disconnect between the party and elected officials. A lot of county level parties, local level parties, see their role as holding elected Republicans accountable to some set of principles that are not very clearly defined. And it's basically, if we don't like you, you're not a Republican, you're a rhino. And the biggest example of that has been out of Catoosa County, where they refused to qualify Republican candidates for county commission up there and were compelled by a judge to do so. And actually, I think they actually did refuse. I recall all the details of that. They completely refused. And at the end of it, the clerk had to end up qualifying. And 2 of those candidates that they refused to qualify actually won. So there's this disconnect between what the party thinks is a Republican and people who vote Republican in our state who don't attend conventions or party meetings see as an acceptable level of conservatism or political ideology. But in my conversation with one of those members of leadership, they're like, Scott, they're going to say that we are ignoring them. But here's the truth. We booked this thing. If you're going to have a big gathering, you have to book way in advance to find a facility that can hold the group that you're going to have. And plus, we have scheduling issues. You have to make sure kids are out of school. And what is happening this weekend, in addition to the GOP convention, is every 2 years, the House Majority Caucus gets together for a retreat. They bring everybody in. They have a series of meetings. The families get to participate and come in, and they have basically team building type of stuff where it's not really organized either. you just get to know each other on a more personal level. And it's a really valuable time to get to know everybody in their families, and you connect interpersonally. So this weekend, they had already scheduled this weekend to be that retreat down in Jekyll Island. So when you go to convention, there are only going to be a few, and they're skipping their retreat weekend, which is a very valuable time for legislators, in order to go to convention, but there's not going to be a lot of them. Are you hearing anything about that from other delegates?
There will be one state rep that is going to be at our convention, and that's going to be, I believe you pronounce her last name, Kahan.
Noel Kahan, yes.
Kahan. I believe that she is chairing a committee. I want to say rules. Anyways, she will be there, and I think she will be the one, I assume, that carries the resolutions into the House. I have not heard from anybody that is specifically upset about that, but generally speaking, I don't talk to the people that would get upset about that a whole lot. And I had actually spoken to a couple of my state rep friends and said, yeah, I think a couple of you guys have planes, so whenever you're done there, you could just fly right up to Dalton. And one in particular said, yeah, if I'm getting in my plane, the last place I'm going is to Dalton, Georgia.
That would be John LaHood, right? John flies around the state in a plane.
I will not name names.
I will.
But it wasn't John. It wasn't John. I'll say that.
Well, there are more than one state rep that flies around. That's cool.
Yeah, there's a couple of them that have their pilot's license. But yeah, I'm not hearing anything other than I think most people are focusing on the leadership races right now, and we probably will have some state senators there because half of the chamber is running for statewide office.
No kidding. No kidding.
But I anticipate to see some of them. But no, I haven't heard anything like that.
That's good. It's good to know. But so for the record, it wasn't because they didn't want to be there. It's because, again, they weren't included in the planning. Had they been included in the planning, maybe this scheduling conflict could have been avoided. But that's a criticism. That's my criticism, not Ryan's. That's Scott's opinion. There continues to be a disconnect in communication between the party and elected officials. Moving on. So I want to talk a little bit about this debate that I got to moderate this week on behalf of AFP. And I am incredibly honored that AFP decided to invite me to moderate this thing. I don't live in that district. So before I tell you about what was said by who during that debate, I think it's important to know our favorite little group of goofballs, rejects, and a-holes, the GRA, known as the Georgia Republican Assembly in their own circles, put out a flyer that had my name listed as a candidate that they had invited to their own forum. Now, there were two other forums scheduled, one by AFP, another by the Cherokee County Republican Women, who always have an event. Both of those are free to attend. The GRA is charging $15 for an advance ticket to attend and $20 if you show up at the door in order to get in to talk to the candidates. So there's a major difference there. Not explicitly saying it's a grift, but you don't have to pay to get access to these candidates. So just keep that in mind if you're interested in learning more about the Senate candidates. There's going to be another convening, another forum, another debate between these candidates coming up, sponsored by the Cherokee County Republican Women. It'll be at the historic courthouse in Canton, always is. If you know anything about our local politics, it's always the same place. It's always put on by the same groups. And I'm sure that the candidates who participated this past week will have some experience under the belt and they'll perform even better. But I really just want to point out a couple of things. In their flyer, they spell my name with 2 T's instead of 1. And some of those folks over there, especially in the Cherokee chapter, they know who I am. They know better than that. So I took them to task on social media. I said, hey, you know how you know you can't trust anything the GRA says? Because they have me listed as a candidate. It's not me. I got calls from other elected officials who were like, are you really doing this? Like, Some of them were excited. Some of them were like curious. Others were like, please don't do this. Like, and I'm like, guys, calm down. I don't live in the district. I live in Kay Kirkpatrick's district, and I'm just fine with that. And even if I was in the 21st Senate district, I like my work now. So I'm not giving it up to go run for state office for 20 grand a year. It's not happening. I've done that. I put my family through that. You'll never see my name on another ballot. So we'll squash the rumor that I am running for anything. But when I called out the GRA, I tagged them in my post. And they doubled down. They're like, no, you think you're the only Scott Turner in Cherokee County? And I was kind of like, well, I tell you what, why don't you send me his campaign website and I'll make sure he gets invited to the other forums. Right? They completely doubled down. Closing for qualification. Qualification is the period of time when anybody who wants to run who's qualified, meaning they are a resident of Georgia for a year before the election, that they live in that district for a year before the election, they can go and sign up. They spend their $400 qualifying fee. They go down to the Secretary of State's office. They basically are registering, I am a legitimate candidate for this office. They declare their party affiliation, and it's a jungle primary to start. And they closed that yesterday at noon, and no Scott Turner came forward to qualify. Yet their flyer remains out there with my name on it. I continue to get calls. A very high-level Republican called me earlier this week to ask me, hey, what you thinking? And I was like, I'm thinking I really like my day job. That's what I'm thinking. I'm not doing it. So,
Have you ever seen the movie Distinguished Gentleman with Eddie Murphy? He shortens up his name to be the current congressman. So I'm just thinking in my head, Scott Turner, the name you know.
That's the name you know. Yeah.
Never, not necessarily the name you like, but it's the name that you know.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. It's funny because during the debate that I moderated, the folks at AFP, when they introduced me, are like, all right, they're telling the crowd, hey, we're going to keep this really positive. Please hold your applause. Absolutely no booing. So I get on stage and I was like, wow, you guys are really honoring the no booing thing. Like, I expected at least a couple boos. And I looked out at the crowd and I was like, Michael Caldwell? And Michael's like, boo. I was like, yes, thank you. Yes. Now we've gotten that out of the way. But yeah, it definitely, I feel sorry for anybody that would have my name running for office right now because, according to what I'm hearing on Fox News, people like me who think government should be limited, that spending should be limited, taxes should be low, that markets should be free from government interference, and people should be able to chart their own course in life are sort of heretics. Actually, some of the Republicans I identify most with, guys like Rand Paul. I stood on stage with Rand Paul when he announced his candidacy for president in 2016. I'm really proud of that guy. I'm proud that I did that back then. But Fox News has called him a heretic because he is pushing back on the big, beautiful bill.
Yeah. Well, the honeymoon is really sort of over on a couple of these individuals. You really have to be careful, especially with the media themselves, because your back can or your front can just as easily become your back, and those knives are pretty sharp, brother.
Yeah, no kidding.
So, yeah, with the tariffs, the big beautiful bill, we're going to be taking that. No, there's the Epstein thing.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second.
That's coming around.
Yeah, but so let me talk to you a little bit about. Are you familiar with AFP's sort of agenda? Does that get down to you?
Yeah, I have some really good friends that work for AFP.
So AFP and I are pretty closely aligned on a lot of different policies. I love the fact that they've supported this podcast. I think there's a cohesion between the two of us that just really works really well. When I was in the legislature, I would often have one of my pieces of legislation. They wouldn't come to me first. They would just say, hey, this is a bill that we support. And so I became really aligned with them, and we just share a lot of common values, but they're not really focused a whole lot on social issues. Elections is not their thing, even though elections are really my thing. Not really their thing. They're really focused on kitchen table issues, economic issues, the things that prevent you as a citizen of the state and our country from actually making a living. And so, or having your money spent in ways that devalues your dollar. For example, we talked about housing, we talked about regulation, we talked about education and school choice, talked about taxes and reforms. And the questions were really well done. I got credit for writing them. I only wrote one of the questions. The rest of them were written by AFP. They allowed me to add one about transportation because 3/4 of the people who live in Cherokee County leave the county to go to work every day, which is a major concern. And every candidate who has been thinking about running for Senate should be thinking about these policies. And I talked about earlier about how local elected officials have a special skill set and they're passionate about things that are really important. I do not share those passions. So I really admire them for stepping up to be a county commissioner, to be a city council member, to be a mayor. When my own mayor called and said he was going to step down, he wanted me to run for mayor of Holly Springs, I told him I thought we were friends. Like, why would you do that to me? I have no interest in being mayor of Holly Springs ever. No. My friend Michael Caldwell made a very successful transition from state rep to mayor of Woodstock, and Woodstock is taking off. He's doing a fantastic job, but he's passionate about it. It takes a different skill set. And so with these questions, I started out by saying, you really should have thought about these things before you showed up here today. So they're not meant to be gotcha questions. They're simply policy. And the very first question right off the rip was a question about the Promise Scholarship. Are you familiar with that, Ryan, the Promise Scholarship?
Not, no, sir.
So it's $6,500 if you were in the top 20, or sorry, if you were in the bottom 25% of performing schools in Georgia. If one of the schools that are in the bottom 25% is in your zone school district, you're eligible to go and say, I would like the Promise Scholarship, which is basically what we fund each student at with state tax dollars, not local, but state. It's about $6,500. So each student that is in one of those, the parents can go and say, I'm going to take that $6,500 and I'm going to apply it to either homeschooling my kid or I'm going to put them in a private school. And we have seen some private schools sort of pop up, or co-ops pop up, smaller programs pop up where they're filling a need so that these kids that are in these lowest performing schools have other options. They're not locked in by their zip code anymore. It is a major part of the lieutenant governor's plan. The sponsor of that bill, sitting in the audience, Greg Dolezal. He was watching. Also in the audience was Steve Gooch. Until recently, Senator Gooch was the majority leader in the Senate until he announced that he's running for lieutenant governor. So it was these are easy questions. The very first candidate, I think his heart is in the absolute right place, but clearly has not put a ton of thought. It was all Doge and Trump talking points. Doge, 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 Trump, Trump, Trump. God's going to save the state. God's going to save our country. And I thought he came across as genuine, like his heart's in the right place. But I felt like as the forum went on, that he was sort of talked into it, maybe by a political consultant who saw him as a paycheck. And I hope that's not the case. I hope that's just not my cynicism. But again, cynicism, another word for that is life experience, especially knowing the different characters involved.
Reality.
Yeah, it's just the way it is. And I think all the candidates, they created their own lanes for themselves. They really differentiated themselves. We had Stephanie Donegan, who I think wanted to really talk about elections, but elections is not an AFP issue. She really wanted to talk about that. She mentioned it in her closing statement that she mentioned, hey, we didn't talk about it here, but I'm really strong on that issue. We didn't talk about the life issues. She mentioned that. Of the candidates there, my wife said that she connected with her because her communication style was something that she completely understood. My wife actually came to one of these events, which is rare, but she really liked Stephanie. The middle candidate was a firefighter named Bryce Futch, who's also a Club for Growth fellow. And you can really tell like Club for Growth has polished this guy. He was completely knowledgeable about every single issue that was thrown at him. He had an answer, and he was concise. He stood up to talk to them. He tried to connect to the audience. He talked about family in the right way. He talked about being a social conservative in the right way, especially in that environment. And I thought
he has a sibling or a cousin or somebody that's a legislator, right?
I believe his cousin is one of our contributors, Jason Shepard.
Yeah, I just remember seeing that on Facebook.
Yeah.
I agree. That's the only one that I'm aware of. He looked really good,
right,
in the videos that I saw. So very impressive.
I don't know if he'll get the money that would be needed. He certainly had the most polished presentation. And then I've mentioned local officials. I have a deep affection for a guy named Steve West. Steve West has served as a county commissioner here in Cherokee County. He looks like he's straight out of Duck Dynasty or ZZ Top. Like, I'm not kidding. His beard goes down to his belly button. It's awesome. One of the most affable, awesome human beings that you talk to him one-on-one. Love Steve, but you could tell he wasn't prepared to talk about things like healthcare. He hadn't really thought about the school choice thing very much. So that skill set that makes him a really great county commissioner, he's got to do some work, I think. I think he's capable of doing the work too, just to be clear. I'm not overly criticizing Steve. He's my friend. I like him. But there were other candidates I thought that were more prepared, but he has time. And in the next one, I'm sure he'll be more polished. And then there's this guy, Brian Will, who is the fifth candidate to participate. And I'm not even going to mention the two who didn't come. There was a Democrat and another Republican who didn't come. If you didn't come, I'm not going to talk about you. I can't tell you anything good or bad about you. I don't know. But the last guy is a former city council member of Alpharetta. Now, I think about 80% of this district is in Cherokee County, and a little bit goes over into Fulton because that's where the outgoing senator, who is now treasurer of the United States, was in Fulton. But a lot of the district is in Cherokee. Cherokee County has not had a member of the state Senate who actually lives in the county since Chip Rogers left in 2012. So I think they're hungry to have somebody locally. But this guy, Brian Will, I don't know how to put it politely. He sounded like a Democrat. All the issues that we talked about, mind you, most of the stuff that we were talking about are Senate leadership policies, initiatives. We talked about the red tape rollback. And I pointed out, the sponsor of these bills are right here in the audience. And he just completely poo-poos on it. But it was the way that he poo-pooed on it that really kind of stuck with me. Because one of the things he said is he sort of conflated a couple of different concepts about the red tape rollback. And if you're not familiar with the red tape rollback, it was originally billed as sort of the Georgia version of Doge. What would happen is if a board or a regulatory agency had to create a rule that's outside of the legislative process, and that would have a $3 million impact to the people who would have to abide by that rule, then that rule would have to be approved by the legislature in order to remain. Otherwise, it would go away. And so it's meant to cut down on overly burdensome regulations. And the way he presented his opposition to it was that it's too much bureaucracy. So if I were to interpret what he's saying, in the way I understood him, what he's saying, this level of transparency, this level of accountability in government is too much of a burden on government, so we shouldn't do it. And I thought it was really ballsy because that was an AFP-sponsored initiative. Like the red tape rollback, we've talked about it here on the podcast. We also had Greg Dolezal and Tony West as guests on this podcast to tell you, the audience, more about that particular piece of legislation. And he just comes in and just poo-poos all over it. And I thought, wow, that's bold. It's a bold move, Cotton. Let's see how it works out for him. But then he started criticizing the Promise Scholarship. And it was the phraseology that he used to criticize the Promise Scholarship that really like raised my suspicion, because the exact words that he used were the same types of arguments that Democrats use to convince Republicans that the Promise Scholarship is a bad thing. Yes, it's limited to the number of students who can use it. If you are in a high-performing school district, Cherokee County is a high-performing school district. We don't have any schools that are in the 25%, bottom 25%. But he said nobody here would be able to use it. And that is the exact argument that they use. And then he also made this claim, which is false, demonstrably false, that you would have to take money out of the public education system in order to fund it, which is not how the Promise Scholarship is funded. In this state, we fund students, not systems. Each student represents a pot of money, and then the locals subsidize that student with their local property tax dollars. There's a couple different buckets, and there's a third bucket of money in federal dollars that Doge and Trump is trying to fold the Department of Education, which those dollars could take the form of a block grant in the future or just go away altogether. But we shouldn't, as a state, we should never be relying upon federal dollars for things like education. Those are things that the state should be funding. So I just thought it was really interesting to come into an environment where this sponsor of the bill is sitting in the audience, who is one of the upper level Republicans who's carrying the agenda for the lieutenant governor, who is the front runner to become governor, and to tell these people, your ideas are bad. Just thought it was fascinating.
Yeah, like you said, bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off. I think having not seen this, so I can't. I'll just have to take you at your word. But at some point, you need to be able to read the room.
Well, that's it, right? He was connecting with the room.
Really?
The audience members, he got a couple of applause lines, and there's a couple of things that he said I have to fact check. He made some claims about Pathways, which is the governor's healthcare plan. He made an argument for expanding Medicaid, which I ran against that when I ran for state house 10 years ago. Nathan Deal decided we weren't going to expand Medicaid. Brian Kemp came along with this sort of partial thing with some work requirements and some other stuff, but he made some claims about that. But let me tell you what he did that stood out the most. When it came to the transportation question, he talked about how North Fulton County uses T-Splost. Now, T-Splost was voted down in Cherokee County by like 80-20. This is where you don't understand the room. You're from Alpharetta coming into Cherokee County. We have voted down T-Splost at every opportunity. But he's like, oh, we could get buckets of money if we just had a T-Splost, and we could have all kinds of improvements to our roads. And it's okay, but we don't like that here. Like, it's just another. So your answer is tax and spend. Again, he felt like, I know you weren't there, Ryan. So, but I'm saying this for the audience's sake more than anything. It just felt like he borrowed a lot of Democratic talking points and I don't know if it was to show that he knew the issues, if that's what he really believes, or if he's just adopted some Democratic talking points because he's aligned with them. And so there are a lot of question marks in my mind. I don't get to vote in that election, though.
Well, luckily, you've got 38 other candidates to choose from.
Right.
Which, by the way, you might just want to tell a couple of them, say, hey, Congress pays more, and we got a lot of room down there in the first. So y'all that don't get elected here, we could use a new congressman. And that's another thing, not to take it back to that argument, but I think a lot of people are just assuming that perhaps Buddy Carter is going to eventually drop out of the Senate, so nobody wants to run. But yeah. Lots going on up in Atlanta as far as the how many open Senate seats are we about to have?
Dude,
at least
6 or 7. Blake Tillery, Gooch, Brian, who's running for AG, John Kennedy has announced for lieutenant governor, and then Greg Dolezal's thinking about doing something. I don't know what. I wish he would stay there because he would be in charge of the Senate, basically. But you have a lot. And then you have some Democrats who are running for other things, too. Sonia Halpern. You could have 10 or 15, maybe even 20 new faces in the Senate out of a body of 56. That's I mean, look,
Gonna
if
be
I was in the
interesting.
Senate right now, I would stay put just because my seniority would skyrocket. But that's me. Listen, on the other side of this next break, we're going to talk about Fort Knox and the Twitter breakup of the president and Elon Musk. So stay tuned.
Peach Pundit has an anonymous Patreon who would like to invite you to learn more about the Alzheimer's Association. The Alzheimer's Association leads the way to end Alzheimer's and all other dementia by accelerating global research, driving risk reduction and early detection, and maximizing quality care and support. No one should fight Alzheimer's alone. With your help, no one will. Learn more on their website, alz.org.
Golden Retriever Rescue of Atlanta, GRRA, is an all-volunteer, tax-deductible charitable organization. They are dedicated to providing veterinary care, comprehensive evaluation, and foster and adoptive homes to golden and Labrador retrievers who are abandoned, mistreated, neglected, or left in shelters throughout Georgia. We encourage you to visit their website grra.com and help connect people and dogs that need each other in their lives. You truly can make this world a better place by helping find homes of gold for these golden-hearted pups.
We're going to get those two topics in a second. I want to throw Ryan a curveball. Did you see Marjorie Taylor Greene's tweet about not realizing the AI provision was in the big, beautiful bill?
Yeah. What, were you surprised?
No. I mean, this is what Thomas Massey's been saying for a very, very long time is we don't have time to read these 1,000-page bills. They throw them at us and say, vote for it. So, no, I'm not surprised.
And my reading comprehension, I think, is pretty decent. But you give me $1,000-page bill. You give me 72 hours. I think, didn't they just pass well, no, they worked around that.
Right. Suspend the rules.
Suspended the rules to just get the bill passed. Listen, we criticized Obamacare for that. I'm old enough to remember that.
Sure.
At the end of the
we got to pass it to find out what's in it. Nancy Pelosi.
There you go. Absolutely. So does it shock me that she didn't read that? No, but to be a little fair to her, who did? Who read that whole bill? I doubt anybody did.
Sure. I think what was noteworthy for me is her public admission that she didn't realize there was a provision that was so obnoxious to her that she would tweet that I didn't know this was in there, like, and admit it, which I got to give her credit in a way. I wish legislators read the bills. I want them to read the bills, but I got to give her credit for being honest. Like, I got it. There's in my mind, her integrity took up a tick, not completely. It doesn't reclaim the position that she's in my mind completely, but it's up a tick because she was transparent. Look, this was in here. Didn't know it was, and it was about AI. Do you know much about the provision that she was talking about?
It was basically prohibited any changes or any legislation limiting AI. I believe for 10 years
by the states.
That's by the states, yeah.
Yeah. So it was a preemption bill. It preempts the states from passing their own laws regulating AI. And we have a couple of legislators here. My successor, Brad Thomas, is taking on the AI issue with some gusto and a level of expertise I really admire. I think he's doing a good job as far as presenting well thought out policy around that. And I know not everybody agrees with me on that, but I think he's been doing really good work there. And it would prohibit him from passing any legislation. Some of this legislation that for example, he has said if you are involved in a campaign close to an election and you fraudulently depict a candidate doing something that they didn't actually do, so you're lying to people close to an election in an effort to get them to vote against or for somebody, then that could be criminal. It's almost like defamation, slander, libel. But you have to be part of a campaign, and it doesn't include memes. It includes something it's incredibly difficult to determine by just a regular person's point of view if it's real or not. So if a reasonable person sees it and thinks that's real, and you're part of a campaign and you're getting paid to produce that type of stuff, and there are things and issues to work out with legislation like this. How do you deal with the issue of crossing state lines, for example, which I think he tries to contemplate. But there are things about AI in the coming years that are going to be really scary. And we're going to have to deal with it somehow. And this bill, the big, beautiful bill, prevents the states from tackling these issues in the true federalist model. And so I kind of agree with Marjorie Taylor Greene.
You know, you should have a gong set up in
Every time we agree with Marjorie,
every time you agree with Marjorie or perhaps someone else,
Colton Moore.
you need it. Yeah, there you go. Well,
Yeah,
that one won't get used to a whole.
Well, I don't disagree with anybody 100% of the time. That's what I have found. I don't agree with anybody 100% of the time. I don't disagree with anybody 100%.
At the end of the day, we're largely on the same team.
Right.
A lot of times.
Right.
It's just generally it's about that 20-30%.
But kudos to Marjorie for owning up to it, though. That's all I'm going to say. So before we get to how tariffs, the big, beautiful bill, electric vehicle tax credits, the Epstein files, and the egos of billionaires collide, I want to talk about what happened to Fort Knox. Do you listen to Glenn Beck?
Not anymore. I don't listen to regular terrestrial radio, and honestly, if I'm going to listen to Sirius XM, I'm probably going to put it on Lithium.
There's my man right there. Lithium is
Jam
it.
out to some good music, and all due respect to Glenn, I do see his updates on social media though, and I know he's taking that one.
Yeah. So I used to listen to him on the radio, especially when he's on WSB in Atlanta back in the day. It's like late 08, 9, 10, 2010s, that type of period. Glenn, back in those days, he was the only one talking about things like quantitative easing and how inflationary it was to buy our own debt. and I just thought, wow, this guy is really smart. He's sort of veered away from the more substantive policy stuff, and he's gotten a little too much into sort of the conspiracy theory stuff for me. So I don't, but he pops up into my social media feeds as well. And he's been on this thing about Fort Knox. Is the gold in Fort Knox? Is it? Is it in Fort Knox? Well, there's one man in America that could answer that question right now for Glenn Beck. And I want to call on him to do it. Brandon Beach, if you're listening, pick up the phone and call your boy, Glenn Beck, and invite him up to Fort Knox and show him the gold. Will you? I think we'll all be better off if you show him the gold. Where the gold at?
Now, hey, we got to be careful about this AI stuff too. I want you to send me some of that gold so I know it's real.
Right.
I promise, pinky swear, I'll send it back.
Just one bar will do. One bar.
Largely, mostly in the same size that it came to me. It might be missing a chip or two.
Take some shavings.
I mean, hey, gas money, you know what I mean?
We got to test it to make sure it's real, right?
Absolutely. I got to bite it.
The biting's not going to, I got to take some shavings. We're going to do some chemical analysis to make sure it's real.
Yeah, that let's call it that. Listen, there was what was back in the 70s, I think we had the same issue. I want to say it was, Nixon takes us off the gold standard. And there was this big thing. The gold's not in Fort Knox anymore. And Fort Knox, I think it's the only time cameras have ever gone into Fort Knox. They let people, I can't even remember who they let in there. The gold is there. I mean,
right.
It's there.
It's not tied to our dollar anymore anyway. So even if it was gone, what would you do? What happens?
Sell the hell out of it.
I don't know why Glenn Beck it cares. I really don't. But there's so many conspiracy theories out there. And some of them feel like this would be really easy to just squash that type of conspiracy theory.
I hear there's so many other things at Fort Knox that I would love to see.
Yeah.
I want to say that there's a Spider-Man comic book. The first one is there. I'm hearing that I've read that there's quite a few different things that are different than what you would expect. So I would love to just go see and look around at that.
Right. I knew some folks when I was in the Army who were stationed there, but they never saw the gold. They weren't allowed in the vault. So just adding fuel to the fire, I guess.
And until I see it.
The biggest news of the day has to be Elon Musk and Donald Trump breaking up. Did you see this stuff? What did you tell me your take? Yeah, we did. We celebrated her birthday on our socials. Yeah. Happy birthday, Miss Laura. Hope it was a great one. Yeah. So, I have found the most reliable source of information on Twitter is 3-Year Letterman. And 3-Year Letterman has been tracking when are they going to release the Epstein files for weeks. And the other day he tweeted, "Happy 14-week anniversary to those who celebrate," because 14 weeks ago they said we're going to release the files, and they didn't. The files have yet to be released, and I don't know if that's because they're part of an ongoing criminal investigation. Maybe. I mean, Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell, the Epstein's mistress, wife, partner, I don't know what you call her, cohort in crime, co-conspirator. Don't do Dolly that wrong like that. No, Dolly's a saint. Uh-huh. I tell you, so being in Austin at the Texas Capitol, the only thing I could think about was the guy singing that song while twirling his hat and doing the dance to the Texas Capitol, being in that spot where they filmed it. I'd had that song in my head the entire time. Didn't tell any of the legislators I met with. I had that song in my head, but yeah, I bet they do. I bet they do. So I guess to sort of like go back a little bit, this really kind of the first crack in the alliance between Musk and Trump appeared, I think, over tariffs. And probably even going back further, before Trump was sworn in, there was this immigration issue where Musk has articulated sort of the big business view of immigration. You know, you should take highly talented people and bring them in. It only makes America better. It's stronger. It makes us more competitive when we take the best from around the world and bring them here. And that was sort of Musk, and MAGA was like, no, we don't want anybody. So there was I think that was the very first like minute crack. But then tariffs came along, and Musk was openly calling members of the cabinet idiots over tariff policy. And that was probably a larger crack. And then Doge doesn't find the $1 to $2 trillion in cuts. They find about $160 billion. And that number is Pi. If Pi was here right now, he'd be disputing, saying, it's not 160. I'm just going to go with it. Let's say it's $160 billion that they found. So in order for that to be permanent, it has to go through that rescission process that Pi has explained on the podcast in the past, where the president sends the list of things he doesn't want to spend money on to Congress, and they have to approve them. And the rescission package was about $9 billion. And a lot of those programs are, in fact, things that Doge recommended be cut. For example, foreign aid, U.S. aid. In Doge, recommended cuts, it's included in the rescission package. Cuts to NPR and PBS, National Public Radio, Public Broadcasting. Doge had those as cuts. They're in the rescission package. U.S. Institute for Peace and Doge, also in the rescission package. Adjustments to Medicaid and SNAP and Doge, not in the rescission package. DEI programs in Doge, not in the rescission package. Federal workforce reductions, redundant positions, filling open positions in Doge, not in the rescission package. And those are just a few examples. You have this is a man, the richest man in the world. He sends a rocket into space to save stranded astronauts because the public sector solution failed. So he did that with private corporations' assets to go save those folks. He has aspirations to get America and the world and human beings on other planets. Spent hundreds of millions of dollars trying to get Donald Trump elected, and was his biggest cheerleader the entire campaign last year. And he just put in all this free work, coming up with $160 billion of cuts, and the rescission packet's $9 billion. How would you feel if you were Elon Musk and you saw, are they serious? And then they passed the big, beautiful bill. Right. Right. And I think it's important to note that Elon Musk has been consistent. He's a purist and he believes what he believes. He thinks government shouldn't be spending what it's, and that he talks about deficit spending in a way that's dire, because we are in a dire situation. The interest on the national debt is $1 trillion a year. That's unsustainable. We can't keep doing that. No matter how much you grow the economy and GDP, you're not going to be able to sustain that. So he's being sort of the adult, even though now he's acting, I think, sort of childishly. But then, so the Epstein files are never released. And another thing about electric tax credits, the electric vehicle tax credit cut is in the big, beautiful bill. And so Trump is now saying, oh, he got mad because I took away his goodies. I took away his tax credit. Last year on the campaign trail, Musk said, get rid of it. Doge recommends getting rid of the electric vehicle tax credit. After the tariffs and after people stopped buying Teslas because his popularity took a hit because of his work in Doge, because he was doing this work for us, trying to find these cuts, these efficiencies, and try to make government work better for us, the left started attacking him and his car sales have depressed. And so he took a more nuanced approach. He said, look, don't get rid of them right away. Just phase them out and give us time to phase down. But he still supports getting rid of them, just at a longer runway. Because he knows we can't, as a country, we can't continue to afford to spend this way. So you have electric vehicle tax credits and the big, beautiful bill and tariffs and the immigration stuff. And then you have this Epstein file that the Trump administration is saying, oh, we're going to release it. And they haven't. And today he says, you want to know why it hasn't been released? Donald Trump's in it. Have a nice day, DJT. Elon Musk has a poll on Twitter right now. Should there be a third party? I think he's gone nuclear. I don't think there's any bringing him back. You're never going to bring him back into the fold now. He's going to go start his own thing, I think. I mean, do you have a prediction? What happens next? Pay. If he bought Facebook at this point, it'd be an antitrust suit tomorrow. You're a wrestling fan, right? I mean, put him in a cage match. Let's see what happens. Well, the president's pretty tight with Joe Rogan. So it's like when your friends fight for those guys. Yeah. NASCAR. Oh, College football too. He showed up the national championship game. They loved it. Yeah. Listen, folks, we've run out of time. We hope you've enjoyed the podcast. Thank you, Ryan, for filling in. I enjoyed the conversation. For those of you heading to convention, we'll be praying for you. Let me know how it goes. Pray for your safety and your sanity. I won't read it, just post it on the blog so everybody else can. But I think it would be interesting reading. I'm just having a hard time carrying who's going to be in charge of the party for the next couple of years. And I don't know. Oh, I'll leave you with one final thought. Did they still allow candidates to run from the floor, or they do away with that? Okay. So if they did allow people to nominate themselves from the floor, you could probably win by pointing out your opponent likes his own post on social media. Just saying. Thank you for listening to Peach Punt, the podcast. My name's Scott Turner for Ryan Purvis. Peach Punt, the podcast is usually me, Scott Turner, Jason Pye, and Buzz Brockway. All the music you hear is original by Jason Pye. If you'd like to be a Patreon to the podcast, head on over to patreon.com/peachpundit. Sign up for one of those tiers. We'll put you in the and we'll add you to the people who rock. We got a new one today, Ryan. Bethany Ballard, lifting you up. She does rock. She rocks without being a person who rocks. I love Bethany. Bethany Ballard, Justin Wright, Brett Harrell, Reed Powell, John Vestal, Ryan Graham, Bo Brandon, our anonymous guy, Mike Buchert, Ron Daniels, Stuart Wilkinson, Rob Lee, Tony West, and Friends Americans for Prosperity, Colin Martin, James Hall, the aforementioned and present Ryan Purvis, Hank Burnham, Jeff Cobble, Shannon Ferguson, Jordan Reed, Sam Thomas, the OG. Thank you all for listening. We'll catch you next time. Peace out.